We've had a lot of discussion on the statement of birth record, and I just want to clarify some observations that we've come across over a period of time. And one thing you have to understand about this statement of birth record, it appears there is a record here. It does place the given name, it does place the surname, but the clear understanding of this document is the given name itself that's on this record technically in law is not transferable. Even though it shows up on the record, the only point of the Registrar General would be to an extent placing jurisdictions on paper, and to an extent also clarifying a right. And so therefore, under the common law, Christianity was protected. And therefore, this document, even though it places the given name on there, it was not required. Even though it's showing up there on the record, it's really not seen. The only thing they're really after on the statement of birth record is really the surname. Because our country operates in a very unique manner, which is under a stratocracy. So a stratocracy is basically a government of military chiefs. Therefore, Attorney General, Solicitor General, Auditor General, Registrar General. Those are military chiefs. But then we get into the illusion, how does everybody get paid in this type of an arrangement? Because we know people are not going to work for love, they're going there for money. If it was only charity, then we'd only be needing our given names. But because the army or the arms in the surname is the action that's going on, the payment goes through the arms on the common name, on the surname. And common, to an extent, means polluted. It's also an error. It's a mark. It's a blemish. And therefore, because we are asking for money instead of giving of ourselves gratuitously for love, it is highlighted or accentuated on the document. And therefore, it's underlined. Now, not every single statement of birth does this, but the majority did in the past. And we don't want to get into debates on why they stopped or why they and not continue with that process. So what's happened on here, even though your given name shows up on the record, it's really off the record because it's not required, because it's a jurisdiction that does not belong to them, but the surname does belong to them. And it's in respect for the fact the parents were involved. So the Registrar General does not seal this document on the inside of the frame, only the outside. And in fact, when you're authenticating this record, the authentication does give evidence that the full faith and credence ought to be given to the Registrar General's seal, but it does not say it has anything to do with the contents of the document. It just says that the document is in the custody, the record is inside the custody of the Registrar General. And we know that a static, or the word static statistics, when we say someone, do you want to be a statistic? That would be a terrible thing, because generally you're usually referring to them being part of something that's based on a calamity, an accident, something that died. So we don't want to be a statistic in this, and therefore they really are not viewing the statistic on this as far as what you would think. They're only talking about the body. They're not talking about the spirit or the soul. And therefore they can only take your body, they cannot take your soul. And in the arrangement that is being done here, they've created to an extent, an idea of a false surety, which has been going on for a long time. But remember, we're working in civil law, which has to do with money. This is a civil document, and civil is pagan. And therefore, if you were claiming to be a civilian, this is how you would have began on paper, but it does not say that they're not recognizing something under the constitution of this document. Because if you've ever been in a court case where a constitutional issue has been brought up by the submission of this court as being placed as evidence on the record, that is probably one of the first things that the judge or the justice of the peace will mention, which is possibly a constitutional objection has been raised. Because the Christian name or the given name is really the only thing that's a given. That's something bestowed upon you. Your parents had to know this before they placed it on the record. Therefore, they gave that beforehand. It cannot be transferred to anybody. In a later video, we'll get into court case history that would support what we're talking about, because there has been evidence to prove the fact that you cannot, nor could your parents, transfer the right or the jurisdiction of that, for one thing, being the Christian name or the given name belongs to Jesus Christ. And it does not belong, technically in a sense, to a foreign jurisdiction to that. And therefore, they have their surety, and there is the Christian surety. And we know that belongs to Christ, so therefore, you are the purchased possession of Jesus Christ. You will not realize that according to Scripture until you reach heaven. But you have this still on this earth because you are the spirit to whatever will energize anything that goes on. But you do not, as a Christian, have to bear arms. And because it is an impossibility through the gens or the Gentile uncovenanted position, which occurs under the surname, to prove its actual history. It's almost an improvable or unprovable situation, to the extent that we'd be spending hours upon hours upon hours in a courtroom debating on who would have actually a right to the actual surname. Now, if it's from a Gentile background, and someone had enough records to prove that they actually have the armorial bearing jurisdiction to use that, I've never met anybody ever that could prove that. And in fact, most birth genealogy records don't go back on average for most people beyond 100 years or maybe 200 years. Then it becomes extremely difficult to trace with clear evidence on paper. What's very interesting about the Christian name, it is a name or a given name bestowed upon the child beforehand, before something is written on a record. And that is not something that can be transferred, because there would be no point of your existence, and that's a given. So your given name is given you as a gift. It's bestowed. And therefore that gift belongs to you, and Christ made sure that it was not transferable to anyone. It's a gift from him if you walk this. But the surname, have respect for it because it belongs to them. And when you touch that other side and you start using that, and it does not belong to you, well, that is alienable. That is able to be liened. And therefore, your inalienable Christian name is not what is really appearing on this record, because they can't see the spirit of the substance. They're only seeing the form, and form lacks substance. So in this situation here, the only thing that really is recognizable in their law is that surname. But if you are walking as a Christian, you're not for hire, and there is a twofold arrangement going on. In one way, it looks like you've been framed for a crime, because it would be a crime to bear arms and be a defector against Christianity, as it would be a crime to bear arms against the sovereignty. And since all democracies are nothing more than treasonous illusions of those that are involved in imagination, a group of pagans who wish to think they can create their own surety with Satan against God, denying Christ, we're in a situation where we have to decide which way we're on. Are we on one side or are we on the other? And this document creates a constitutional exemption, because you didn't have anything to do with this. This just kind of happened. It's like two jurisdictions colliding on paper, but they're separated. And one is separated and distinguished from the other, as we know as Christians in Scripture, be ye separate. Therefore, it did not mean be ye joined, and you cannot join two things that do not belong. You cannot join truth with fiction. And therefore, a legal fiction, which is how our world operates, says that we could legally put, with your consent, the two names together. And therefore, you are now surnamed, which means the name's been altered from your Christian name to the surname. So you're only seen in the aggregate at that point. You're only seen as something in common. You're not seen as something separate and distinguished anymore. Therefore, the illusion is we've now created an individual in the army, in the commonwealth, that now is one based on the two names joined together, but they cannot be. And therefore, we'd have to legalize that. And that means it was not legal before that, which means this document's not legal. But it appears that the two names seem to be on the record, but they are not joined at this point. They are separated for a reason. So, in the situation for Christians, they have to see that. Being not a Christian, if you're in that position, in a non-Christian arrangement, well, then you would understand the common side, and the common side has no covenant with the true God. And therefore, this would be on the side of falsehood. But no performance was required because everything was given on this record that was required. So even though the parents may not have known what was going on, the given name placed on there could never have been transferred to the state anyways. The state name is not the Christian name, so it'd almost be like going to court and dealing with an issue when they say state your name for the record. Are they talking about me to state the Christian name, or are they asking me to state the surname? Well, they wouldn't be asking you to state the Christian name because the state is separate from the church. And the church name is the Christian name because that belongs to Christ. And he is the inventor or the founder of Christianity. So that property belongs to him, and he died for that, for you. The surname has no substance. It's only in form. It means nothing. But if you consent to it, you now become something else. So it'd be like me turning you into something. If you remember in Scripture, Jesus was turned into the Gentiles. He was informed on. So they've turned your Christian name into the surname, and all they're seeing now is the surname. But the only one that can activate that by expression, by writing, would be you at this point. And in order to participate in the society we live in, the only way you'd be participating in arms would be to sign something under the curse of the law, because you'd be denying Christ, which would mean you'd be accursed. You'd be with an uncovenanted nation, which is those that belong or identify themselves as gens or Gentiles. So the Christian name on this document is under constitutional exemption. Even though it appears on the record, it is off the record. We're going to read constitutional exemption. You'll notice many times I'm just making notes. I'll go into certain books to check things out. And of course, we know we want to hold the Bible as first, but if you don't understand how to speak or you don't know how to read, it could be difficult to actually function in life. And in our world, the law of language, which is grammar, really runs most of what we're talking about. And we could spend hours in videos on grammar. But the Bible, if I don't know how to read, the problem would be at that stage, I may need to get audio cassettes that read the Bible to me. I may be able to understand, but I just don't know how to read. So it's amazing how people can actually understand language, but they don't actually know how to read it itself off the print. They can't identify it, but they can understand because they've only learned by hearing. So in this situation, there are books to find. Be careful with, we never mentioned this before, and we're going to make some clarity, Strong's Concordance. Be very careful with it because it does have problems that do lead more to understanding that the Catholic Church lexicon seems to be the primary direction of it, and therefore it could lead you to words that are not correct. So be very careful if you're going to Strong's. I use it more as a reference to find a word in the King James Bible, more so always to go and check it in reference, because I go to many dictionaries, and usually I find that the dictionaries are easier to understand on the word, because that's really what I'm dealing with in English. So if I'm checking out a word and what it means, it may be not prudent to completely rely on one book. Maybe I would say in an extent there could be 60 or 70% that could be completely right in the Hebrew and the Greek references to the words, but the problem being is where you hit the ones that are wrong, if you're relying on it 100% and not doing your due diligence, you could end up being led down a direction that would be incorrect. So we're just giving you a concern that even though this book is out there, it's probably one of the most published, be careful, strong may not be very strong. So there are other concordances you can find, but I mainly use it as a dictionary reference to find the word in the King James Bible where it occurs, more so than always going in to find out, because I can go to the dictionaries to find out, and certainly older dictionaries or larger dictionaries can give you an understanding of it in English and give you a better clarity. So when you're putting down a meaning on a word to find out what something means in one of the scriptural verses, you can take every word out of the dictionary even to find out what that whole sentence means and take it down that direction. It does not hurt to go down that, but be careful in there, because there is a little, I would say a little, but a stronger influence that the early days of what I say Reformed Christianity had a lot to do with the Catholic Church. And for Protestants that are out there, you have to understand that you're protesters against the Catholic Church, but Christianity is Christianity. And therefore, the protesters were still attached to the pagan Catholic Church on its doctrines. And therefore, many times what they were doing was, they were just saying what they didn't like here and there and there. So that's like saying, I want to be involved in democracy, but I don't like some little parts here and there, but I don't mind being democratic. Well, that's ridiculous, because if you're democratic, you're in. And if you don't like it, then you leave. But you don't go in and say, I'm just going to go in there and become a faction to cause trouble. So Christians have nothing to do with this. So therefore, Christianity has nothing to do with Catholicism, nor does it have anything to do with Protestantism, because I'm not protesting as a Christian, as a Protestant, nor am I involved in the Catholic Church as its version of Christianity, which came in 4 centuries, generally later after Christ's death. Therefore, they entered in, as Christ said, that would be like wolves in sheep's clothing, that would get in there and apostate the church. And therefore, the problem, what we've dealt with in the Reformation of the Protestants, they themselves have probably created the mega amount of divisions. There's probably more versions of Catholics or Catholics. They're in their stage that happened in around the 4th century when Constantine Romanized the idea of Christianity, because they couldn't squash it. So they made it the state religion. In other words, they civilized it. So hopefully you understand that at times you have to do your due diligence. We don't want any problem with you believing that we're trying to promote each book. You have to do your due diligence in whatever dictionary you're doing to find out you're getting the clear meaning. The word we're looking for here, or the phrase, is constitutional exemption. This comes out of the Canadian Law Dictionary. So for those on the Canadian side of the border, I'm going to just read this nice and slow. Constitutional exemption is a device which enables the court to uphold a law that is valid in most of its applications. The court does this by creating an exemption, declaring the law unconstitutional and invalid in their application to specific individuals or groups. Now, Christians, to a large extent, I would say, are like stowaways on a lot of these pagan ships. They were already Christians, but they ended up on someone else's citizenship. And therefore, they didn't realize they were always a Christian. They always had the jurisdiction to that. And being no part of the world, they're neutral to the affairs of man and what its makeup is and structure. So therefore, the construct that is out there, which is really based on a fraudulent way to create an idea of government that is based on man's error and sin, has flourished across the world. And we're at a pinnacle time right now where Christians need to understand that they're not there to fight. Their jurisdiction is already spoken for on the documents. And therefore, Christianity is still protected under the common law, and it would be blasphemous to write anything on paper that would blaspheme Christianity. And therefore, an error on the record, you cannot be a Christian Gentile. You can be a Gentile who converts to Christianity, but you cannot be a Christian Gentile. Our society operates on that thought. And therefore, it's by your own consent, and therefore the attraction is to, of course, get involved in the commerce of the world, which makes yourself part of the world. There are many scriptures, James chapter 4, which goes into these topics about being separate or know ye not, that friendship with the world is enmity with God. When you join an association, you are in a membership. And so it'd be impossible for many Christians today to get a handle on this, because that means they have to make a change. And it is very difficult. The more I have in this world, the more I believe in this world, the world, or the secular side of society, is based on godless activity, and therefore secular meaning godless, not spiritual. It is not by chance that we have a spiritual name, which is our Christian name, and then a secular side. And the government is only looking at the secular side when you energize the secular side. So we're aiming for non-participation under constitutional exemption. We're not there fighting, we're not there protesting. There's nothing to protest about. You already are a Christian if you believe you're a Christian, and therefore you walk as a Christian in spirit and truth. But you can't walk in lie. And therefore our idea of the combining of the two becomes a legal fiction. We legalize an idea of putting two things together that do not belong. And therefore, under the definition of legal fiction really says that X is Y and cannot be disproved. Because if you're saying the Y, the X has no more any original meaning of what it was. So therefore, if I say the surname Smith, and I think I'm the Christian man John attached to it, that's not going to work in a court of law, because the minute that you speak that surname, you have no covenant, you're damned. And therefore, X becomes Y, like it's been surnamed or changed. You've been turned into a Gentile as Jesus was turned into the Gentiles by the Jews. And hopefully people are not going to take the trail of that statement as me being anti-Semitic, because it has nothing to do with it. It's just observations of what happened from the account that's in the Bible. And therefore we'd have to pull all the Bibles off the shelves if people have a problem with that statement. So realize the same thing that happened to Christ happened to you on this document. You were turned into a Gentile, at least on the face of the instrument.